All right. Looks like we are streaming. We'll see how many folks jump in and join us for the pre-show. As usual, the goal here is to make sure everything's working. Looks like we are up on Facebook. Now let's check the others. We are up on YouTube. We don't seem to be up on LinkedIn. I'm wondering if LinkedIn just isn't going to start till the scheduled time. But we'll see. Let me go to my profile and see if it's showing up there. Yeah. LinkedIn seems to be dropping the ball. I don't know why that doesn't surprise me. Once again, it looks like we're up on YouTube, but it's got a weird description or something. Well, we'll see. Anyway, so we're up on those. That's all good news. I hope everyone has had a excellent new year since it's last time we spoke. It was still 2023. And boy, I tell you, the last couple of months of 2023 really kicked me around. I'm going to apologize right up front in case my voice sounds funny or I just end up sneezing or I have to turn and blow my nose. I'll try to remember to mute the mic. But boy, I tell you, since the end of October, I have had something that has just been coming and going in waves. Started to feel fine about 2 or 3 days ago and thought, hopefully this is the end, but I've been here before. And then I woke up this morning, stuffed up nose, just the whole 9 yards, a little bit of a sore throat. So I don't know what's going on. I did pop positive for COVID just before New Year's, but then I tested myself a week later and I was fine. So, and I don't seem to be able to give it to anyone. At least that's the hope. But obviously for someone in my business, getting out there and doing things is important. But it's really messed with my voice. So I've had to kind of pick and choose when I do podcasts, when I do all the various things I do on YouTube. So that's been annoying. Let's see here. So I'm trying to, let me square away all my chat related things here. Because of the way this works, I have to have, let's see. I kind of have to have a variety of different windows open. I can't, the Facebook comments aren't muxed in with all the other comments from other platforms. So I tend to keep Facebook right up in front. But let me see if I can't get these two side by side so that it's less annoying. Okay. That feels about right. All right, so I can see both chats. Okay. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask before we get going at 10, I'm not going to really get into the main content until 10, but one of the other things that I've got on cue for today is for us to take some time out to chat about new laws relating to real estate in California that we will probably want to know about. Some of them are a little bit bigger picture, I guess, or for folks who maybe have more holdings. But there's a lot in here that's interesting stuff, so I think it's good to know about. I hope you have brought your favorite brew. I have another roll your own that I did today. I don't remember the beans for this one, though. And I know I say that like I'm some connoisseur of coffee, but I'm really not. I do a mocha, so you can barely taste the beans anyway once everything's said and done. But it's not as harsh if you kind of if you do get your own beans and then you grind them and you do the espresso machine and all that stuff. I find it's less harsh when everything is said and done. I don't know. Maybe that's just some sort of weird part of my brain that's making that sound like a normal thing. One thing that's absolutely true, I think that in many of our local markets, we're seeing a rare opportunity in terms of acquiring undeveloped land. And I realize that's a lot more speculative than some folks like to jump into. But if you're someone who really is less interested in speculating and more interested in purchasing to build your home on, I think now is a good time to start that shopping process. There's a lot less competition. It does require some interesting hoops to jump through in terms of qualifying for financing, and it usually requires more of a down payment. But in terms of bang for the buck, I think you're going to find some interesting opportunities. I just closed on a lot that I helped someone sell. And if we had put it on the market a year earlier than we did, we would have absolutely gotten our asking price. But the market has softened so much in the last 8 months that we ended up having to reduce the price, the asking price. And we did end up selling it. It took a lot of aggressive marketing, really, to get out there and get in front of people who would most likely be interested in purchasing it. But it ended up selling. So, and it's just outside. This one was just outside Morgan Hill. And when I say just outside, I mean just outside. The northern border of this lot is the border with the city of Morgan Hill. So it had everything you'd want in a lot. It had not everything. It didn't have water, and it didn't have sewer, obviously, because it's outside city limits. But it had electricity right there at the street. So the other two things you can solve pretty easily, so that you can get a better loan, right? If banks do not like to loan if you don't have power to the lot. So it ended up being, it was one of those few lots that I've seen where I would have liked to have bought it and built a house on it myself. So it was like, it's 5 minutes from the freeway. It's 4 minutes from downtown. Everything was within 10 minutes, whether you wanted to go to the freeway or the supermarket or downtown Morgan Hill. Great lot. So congrats to the folks who purchased that, because I think you got an amazing deal. And when everything is said and done, you will have probably spent at most $800,000, but you'll have a $1.7 million house. You will have made about $1 million in terms of if you decided you wanted to sell it. So we're just 8 minutes away from the stream starting. In terms of other interesting news, or just non-real estate random stuff, I think I tweeted this out, but all of my sons have now graduated college. Yay. And the most recent one graduated in December of last year, and he's looking for a computer science position somewhere. He wants to be a coder. So he graduated with computer science. He's a programmer. So if anybody knows of anything, feel free to share it with me. I'd love to send him a lead and have him be able to thank Dad for turning him on to somebody who had a gig for him. But I know he's out there shopping. I think he's applied to Apple and Google and Facebook. But judging by what I'm hearing over the last couple of weeks, Google's more in the mood to lay people off than hire them. So I'm not sure how that's going. But it also didn't sound like they were laying off coders. It sounded like they were laying off some other folks, more administrative type folks. One of my other sons has taken his LSAT, so he's applying to law schools right now. So he's hoping to go to law school starting later this year. He wants to kick that ball off hard. He kind of took a year off to try to figure out what he wanted to do, and his original plan was to go to law school, but now he's decided he actually wants to do that. So he may end up leaving the state. He's looking at a lot of different schools in Houston and Virginia, and he's also applying locally to Santa Clara University, and we'll see how that goes. But he's most interested in IP law, so he's trying to keep it to universities that rank well in that specific discipline of law. So we'll see how that goes for him. All right, all the numbers look good. If anybody is noticing anything weird on the stream in terms of poor audio or anything like that, please let me know. We're about 6 minutes away from kicking things off and looking at all the numbers. It's always satisfying to see the stream just work. We did have a couple of months there where anything that could blow up did blow up. And it was very frustrating. things have been good. Things have been good since what? Since November, I guess. Things have been okay. We had a really bad September and October, but things are looking good. Let's see. Everything looks good. All right, I'm happy with that. CES just wrapped up. That's the Consumer Electronics Show. And I always like to do a little surveillance of that, or maybe not surveillance, but just check in with folks who've been to see if there's any exciting new technology that might serve as a great innovation for the world of real estate. Nothing super amazing. Looks like it came out of there, which is a little bit of a disappointment. There was some interesting tech that probably isn't mature enough to really be thinking about using, but some of the stuff that sounded more interesting was some of the virtual reality stuff, simply because I like the idea of being able to have an immersive home showing experience for folks. I have a variety of tools that I potentially use to create virtual home tours. And a couple of them are compatible with 3D visors, which I think is kind of neat. I don't think I know anyone who's ever actually, except for one engineer maybe that I've talked to who worked at Apple, who actually used a virtual reality headset to tour a house. That was sort of a one-off weird one in the middle of COVID. I also like the idea of doing live open houses. I've done a couple. So for those of you who have been following me for a while, you know I've done a couple of virtual open houses that are streamed, where I'll do I did one. The last one I did was probably a couple of years ago, but it was a 360 camera that I had that I was carrying around with me in an open house, and it was on YouTube. You could pan it and you could do all this cool stuff, and so you could look where you wanted to look while I was sort of walking through this property, but we could have a chat about what the home had to offer. So that was kind of cool. I'm always digging those kinds of technologies. And if you're someone a real estate person who wants to end up getting into that, my bit of advice would be make sure to bring up a extra battery pack, because nothing is going to empty the battery on your phone if that's what you're primarily using to stream this, which is probably what's going to be happening if you're trying to do things as easily as possible. Just be ready to have a battery pack so that you can connect your phone at some point, because it ends up being a pain in the butt. We're about 3 minutes out from kicking things off. Where did my comments go? There they are. Okay. I had scrolled away without realizing it. Excuse me. So hopefully we will make it through today's live chat without me completely losing my voice. Every once in a while when I get to this point, you can sort of feel it coming on, I think, right? Most of us can feel when we're starting to lose our voice. And I've got that tickle at the back of the throat. I've got the sinus stuff happening. So unfortunately, I'm getting the feeling like things could happen, but we're going to try and push through here and just get it done. Lots of interesting stuff coming up relating to new laws in California. It's a shame. I think that there is this problem in California where it is becoming almost I hate to use the term, but it's almost a hostile environment, right, for investors to get things done, and for people to want to get into investing. One of the things I do when I'm advising clients who are looking at selling their homes or listing their homes or whatever, or coming up with a plan where they want to go down the road, I'll oftentimes suggest the possibility of becoming a landlord, particularly since, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the numbers relating to that, particularly here in Santa Clara County in the South Valley. But it can be such a lucrative opportunity for folks who have bought their home not 20 years ago, 30 years ago, folks who just bought their home, say, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. There are some amazing opportunities given where rents are right now, and given the rent to own ratio. It's crazy. And I've got numbers on that we can talk about today too. So I think I put those back towards the end of today's show for us to chat about if anyone's up for that. But we're just a minute away from getting started. And then we'll just kick off with the numbers. I'll do a quick introduction just so the new folks know who the heck I am. Let me get another little hit of coffee here. Oh, I've also had some conversations with folks about, obviously not real estate related, but sort of my weight loss goals for 2023, which I met and exceeded by a good chunk. So I'm kind of proud of that. My goal was to lose 50 pounds in 2023, and I lost 65. So I'm kind of proud of that. If someone wants to talk more about that, I'm happy to offer up what my experience has been. But there are options for you, right? If you've been someone struggling for a really long time, feel free. All right, here we are. It is now 10 a.m. We can officially kick off the live stream. Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I am a licensed real estate broker right here in Santa Clara County. I've been serving the Santa Clara County since I first got licensed as an agent in 1988. And every month we like to get together and have a chat about what's going on in the wide, wonderful world of real estate, of all the news, and then try to keep it a deal where we understand what is happening locally. The goal here is to start off with knowledge so that we can make decisions down the road that'll help us grow, whether we have solid real estate goals or we're just someone who doesn't own a home and wants to, or someone who does own a home and wants to understand what our options are or what the market's looking like. That's kind of what it's all about, just getting the knowledge out there. If you would like to get in touch with me or take advantage of any of the tools that I offer my buyers and sellers to push them along in their journey, you can check those out at soldbyrobert.com. I've got a great tool that is a sort of a monthly update for you if you're a homeowner to let you see what your home value is, what the market's doing in your local area. But then it kicks up to 11 and gives you tons of different tools to understand how you might potentially tap the equity that you've built up in your home. It's a really amazing tool. It's from the folks over at HomeBot. And every year I do a review of the most amazing technologies that I can help with my clients. And that one absolutely won in 2023. And I did another review this month, and it's still the best tool out there. So it's something that I provide at my expense. Feel free to check it out. It doesn't require you to log in or create an account to do that initial assessment of what your home's value is. But if you want to get that monthly update and have access to the other tools, then you can provide it with an email address and all that. And you can cancel at any time. No spam, I promise. But feel free to check that tool out. Okay, now let's go ahead and jump in. And we're going to kick things off with the monthly numbers, which is the way I like to do it. Just so that way you've got data in your pocket that we can potentially chat about. So if you have any questions, this is the goal here is to give you sort of that 10,000 foot view all the way down to smaller communities. So what we're looking at here is year over year comparisons. Let me get my ugly face out of here. This is Santa Clara County, which obviously has the highest numbers, the highest volume, which gives us more reliable statistical data, right? The bigger the sample size, the better the data. And so we start at Santa Clara County, then we go down to San Jose, which is the largest geographical area within the county, or at least the most active city within the county. And then we go to Morgan Hill and Gilroy, sort of just starting there in the county and coming all the way down through the South County. And as we start, what we see is the active listings number. Now, these are the number of homes that were on the market. So think of this as you as a seller, this is your competition. This is how many other homes were out there. If you're a buyer, this is the number of homes you had to choose from. And compared to the same time last year, so December of 2022 compared to December of 2023, we saw a 28% decline in the total number of homes. So way down, 1,037 last year, 749 this year. Dramatically low supply, and keep that in mind as we go, and also keep it in mind as you hear headlines relating to real estate as you're going through your day, because they're talking about how sales are down, and well, sales are down because there's not enough homes to sell. Demand still outstrips the supply, at least in our market. This may not be true everywhere across the country, but that tends to be what we're seeing here. So that was it for Santa Clara County. For San Jose, it was a 29% decrease. 520 homes available last year, 368 homes available this year. In Morgan Hill, it was down 26%, 43 homes last year, 32 homes this year. And in Gilroy, it was down 50%, 82 homes last year, 41 homes this year. And Gilroy is an interesting one. Gilroy continues to be sort of an outlier community that is showing different trends than other areas. Let's go ahead now and look at what the numbers were for new listings. These are homes that were added to the marketplace. So this is homeowners who decided to become sellers. They decided, I want to sell my home. I want to get out from under it. And I want to move on. Interesting thing to note, the numbers relating to where people are moving to have dramatically changed. When I first got into the business, late 80s, early 90s, all the way up till mid 2000s, 2010, it was typically 80% of the people who were selling were staying in the state. They might be going somewhere else in the state or even someplace in the same county, but they weren't leaving. Now that's the reverse. Since about 2014, 15, I've seen a steady increase in the number of sellers who don't just want to sell their home and move somewhere in the state. They want to move out of the state entirely. Idaho, Arizona, Texas, Florida, these are all states that are, and Utah now is another big one that I'm hearing a lot more from folks. But that's an interesting change. Not anything you need to worry about, I guess, but something I find interesting. So this is the new listings. This is the number of homes that have been listed. It's up 26% in Santa Clara County. 377 homes listed last year in December of 2022. And for some reason that says December of 2023, December of 2023. That's not what it is. It's December of, the lighter colored one is 2022. Apologies for that. 475 homes this year for a 26% increase. San Jose, 27% increase, 206 homes last year, 262 homes this year. Morgan Hill, a 10% decline, 20 homes last year, 18 homes this year. Gilroy, an increase of 13%, 24 homes last year, 27 homes this year. The sample size is small enough that I'd call that a wash, even though that seems like a big number, 13%, given the fact we're talking 24 versus 27. For all intents and purposes, for me, in terms of trying to anticipate where things are going, I'd call that a wash. I would say that's on par with last year, about the same. But in general, we can see that aside from Morgan Hill, in general, we're seeing increases in the number of homes that are getting listed. Now, and remember, we're comparing month to month. So this is for December of last year compared to December of this year. So there's no seasonal influence here. This is just the same time of year compared to the same time of year this year. Next, let's take a look at, let me make sure I'm looking at the right thing here. Homes sold. Here we go. December of 2022 compared to December of 2023. Now, this is just the total number of homes sold. And what's interesting is it's actually pretty level, right? I know in Santa Clara County level, it's 673 versus 664. And that's actually, those numbers are wrong. That can't be right. No, you know what? Those are entirely the wrong numbers. I think those are the numbers from last month. Wow, that's not right. Okay, so I'm just ignore the numbers that are there. I do not know how I completely missed this slide, but this is homes sold. Sorry. These numbers are correct. I was looking at the wrong numbers on the other side. Apologies. Don't ignore these numbers. So did we miss? No, we didn't miss new listings. Sorry, man, I just got completely turned around. Homes sold, 664 this year, 673 last year. Which is not that. The thing that threw me off was the percent. So obviously that's not a 26% change. That is a 1% decline from the same time last year. All of these percentages at the bottom are wrong. The numbers in the columns are correct. I apologize. Man, there was something wrong and my brain just wasn't focusing in on it. So San Jose last year, 375 homes sold, 358 this year. That's a 5% decline from the same time last year. Morgan Hill, 30 homes last year, 27 homes sold this year. That was and that's the only right number, coincidentally. That's a 10% decline. But check this out. In Gilroy, 19 last year, 28 this year. That's a 47% jump from the same time last year. So if we compare these numbers, right, to listed, new listings, did we sell more than we listed, or did we list more than we sold? So if we look at Santa Clara County, we sold 664. We listed 475, which means we sold 189 more homes than we listed. Now that trend is true across the board in terms of we sold more than we listed. And why is that important? Because that results in a net decrease in the overall number of active listings. So we had 189 at the Santa Clara County level, 96 more homes sold than listed in San Jose, 9 more homes listed than sold than listed in Morgan Hill, and 1 more home sold than listed in Gilroy. And that's a great trend for sales folks, for sellers, simply because that means lower inventory means greater competition among buyers to find the home they're looking for as we sell those off. I would expect this trend to turn around and that we actually start listing more homes than we're selling in January and February. That tends to be what happens, but we'll see how these numbers play out as we move through the year. Next, let's take a look at months of inventory. Now, if to explain this number, this is how long it would take us to sell off everything in inventory if we locked the inventory and sales numbers as they are in the month of December. So in other words, if we locked the inventory at 1,000, say, and then we noted that in that month we sold 200 homes, how many months would it take to sell off that inventory at that sales level? And that's what this number represents. In this case, we've got 1.1 months worth of inventory in December of 2023. In December of 2022, that was higher at 1.5 months. Now, a balanced market, according to the folks who tell us what a balanced market is about 5 to 6 months. And in California, here in our local area, 4.5 to 5 is probably more balanced. So by having these numbers where they are, this screams seller's market. And that's one reason why we bother to track these numbers. So that's a 27% decline from the same time last year. San Jose, a 29% decline from the same time last year, with 1.4 months to get everything sold, 1 month to get everything sold in San Jose this year. Morgan Hill, 14% decline, 1.4 months last year, 1.2 months this year. Gilroy saw a 65% decline, 4.3 months at the same time last year, 1.5 months this year. And that's another outlier thing relating to Gilroy. Gilroy is getting a lot more attention simply because you're getting more house for the buck in Gilroy. And I think that trend has been true now for a while. For the last few conversations we've had about Gilroy in past shows, that's kind of the place that they've been holding. All right, next, let's see here. Let's talk about homes pending and contingent. So this is a crystal ball number, right? This is a way to indicate what are we going to see next month, because this is where an offer was accepted on a property in the month of December. So it should indicate to some extent what kind of sales results we'll see in the following month or the month after that. Because remember, most escrows take longer than 30 days to close. So if it goes into escrow in the middle of December, it's likely to close not in January, but in February. So we'll see how that plays out. But it is a crystal ball gaze for us. All right, and across the board, we can see this number has increased compared to the same time last year. In Santa Clara County, last year we saw 472 homes go pending or contingent. This year, 531. In San Jose, we saw an 11% increase with 255 homes last year and 284 homes this year. In Morgan Hill, we saw a 63% increase with 19 homes went pending last year, 31 homes this year. And in Gilroy, we had 25 last year, 30 this year for a 20% increase. So interesting numbers. All right, I'm going to have to take a quick break here for a second. So don't go away. I will be right back. I promise it won't be long. All right, we are back at it. Now, we'll get into some of the more interesting numbers. The average original list price. Now, original list price is a number that most other agents don't focus on. I focus on it because it's a great way to get a look inside the psychology of sellers, because this is what the home was originally listed for. So when that listing agent was in that living room with that seller and they agreed on what the home would be initially listed for and what it got entered into the MLS on that first day, that is this number. So it's a way to understand, what did sellers expect in terms of the sales price of their home. In Santa Clara County, let's see here, we see that we had an increase of 7.6% from the same time last year. And what's interesting is we had some variation this time around. We don't usually see this between San Jose and Santa Clara County, for instance. Usually those are very much on par with each other. But we didn't see that this year, or at least this month. In Santa Clara County, $1,802,264 was the average original list price. So what sellers were expecting to get. Last year, that amount was $1,675,000. In San Jose, the number was actually down from the same time last year, which is an interesting change in trend because it hasn't been. And last year, that was $1,414,000. This year, it's $1,329,000 on average. Definitely a good indicator for buyers, right? That we've seen more homes listed on average that were lower than the same time last year. Morgan Hill, down 21.7%. Last year at this time, the average list price was $1,700,000. This year, it's $1,335,000. And in Gilroy, and again, this is a sign of the times that things are driving prices up in Gilroy because of the additional attention it's getting. But last year, the average original list price was $981,000. This year, it's $1,238,000. And a lot of this is simply because of the small sample size. There's also often a shift that focuses more on what one home that's offered for sale for $4 million, and a city like Gilroy can totally throw these numbers off. But overall, we are seeing expectations rising in Gilroy simply because we're seeing more attention in Gilroy, more things happening there. But the next numbers will sort of help satisfy the comparison between what expectations are and what reality is. So now let's take a look at what we're seeing for sales price. This is what homes actually sold for, and we'll also talk a little bit about the difference between expectations and outcomes. So in Santa Clara County, we saw a 9.3% increase in the average sales price. It was $1,644,000 this year was the average sales price. The average sales price a year ago was $1,504,000. And as I said, that's a 9.3% increase, but it is also below expectations. Remember, expectations in terms of list price in Santa Clara County was $1.8 million. So that represents a difference of $1,157,000 less than. So expectations in Santa Clara County are being missed by $157,000. In other words, on average, if you list your home in the month of December and you got it sold in the month of December, the actual amount of money you get is $157,000 less than what you were hoping for, right? Does that make sense? Okay, now, as we move on to San Jose, we see again this number is up. Average sales price is $1.4 million. Average sales price last year was $1.2 million. That's a 15% increase from the same time last year. But remember, if we compare it to expectations, that's actually higher than expectations. So on average, people in San Jose's expectations were being met and exceeded to the tune of $71,867. Morgan Hill also outperforming expectations. $1,479,000 is the number this year compared to last year's $1,295,000. That's a 14.2% increase. And if you compare that to expectations, what folks were originally listing their homes for, this number on sales is $144,000 higher than that. So the interesting average here that we can extrude from that is that in these cases where we're seeing this, we're also implying, and we'll get to this in a second, right? We're gonna take a look at above or below asking price numbers here in a second. But this is our first indicator that what we're seeing is a competitive marketplace where buyers are having to offer more than the list price, right? That tends to be the reflection. But then we get to Gilroy, and the number this year is 1,129,000. Last year, that number was 1,134,000, which is a 0.4% decrease from last year. And based on expectations, that is $108,000 below expectations in terms of average original list price. So those are kind of interesting things to get calibrated to. If we try to figure out what the psychology is behind that, I think some of it is sellers potentially having seen recent activity in Gilroy overestimating what their homes might be worth, but also to a certain extent, just a market reality that higher priced homes are getting listed in Gilroy. As I think some folks see it as an opportunity to do some profit taking, right? There are definitely some areas where you get much, and in some cases we call these gentleman estates, right? Where you've got several acres, particularly in northeastern Gilroy, that have just some beautiful homes that will often offset these numbers. And that can be the case and has been the case in recent months. All right, next, let's talk a little bit about percent over or under asking price. So this is a clear indicator of where we are relating to multiple offers, right? If you're getting above asking price, in general, that is an indicator that you're getting above asking, that you are getting multiple offers, right? Because there's no reason to go above asking price if there aren't competitors there beating you over the head trying to get this property that you're also interested in. Now, what's interesting about this is I totally missed my crystal ball was broken. When I was predicting way back in January, February, March of last year about where this number was going to go, I expected that by the time we got to the end of 2023, this number would be below 100% again for most areas, but that simply did not happen. So let's take a look at where we are at. I thought we'd be on par with where we were in 2022, and we weren't. Santa Clara County, December of 2022, 98.7%, right? So 1.3% below asking price. Now it's at 102.1. That's a 3.4% increase from the same time last year overall. In San Jose, there's a 3.3% increase, 98.6% last year, 101.9, or in 2022. In 2022, it was 98.6. In 2023, it was 101.9. And again, for a 3.3% increase. For Morgan Hill, big jumps. Look at that delta between the two. There's an 8% delta between those two. 94.7% of asking price versus 102.7 of asking price in December. These are crazy numbers to me. I honestly thought we would be below 100%. Gilroy, 97.2%, 100.2. So a 3% delta. And also an indicator that while you are seeing some homes being offered over asking price, these are typically the best representations of that kind of home in the market, right? The vast majority of folks I'm seeing purchasing Gilroy are able to get below asking price. So that's just something to keep in mind to calibrate you to the ground reality as you're shopping for your own stuff, if you're looking potentially in places like Morgan Hill. Next, let's take a look at days on market. This is how long it took a home to get sold. So the time from I listed the house to the listed the home as sold, that's what this number is. In Santa Clara County, that number was 31 days last year, or in 2022, December of 2022. In 2023, in December, it was 19% lower at 25 days. San Jose, over the same time frame, 28 days last time, 22 days this time for a 21% drop, 42% drop in Morgan Hill, where we had 48 days in December of 2022 and 28 days in December of 2023. Gilroy, 40 days in 2022 and a 20% drop to 32 days in 2023. So in terms of just comparing how long it's taking. Now, what's interesting to note here is that all of these numbers represent what I have always referred to as real numbers. And by real numbers, I mean, if all of the days on market were hovering between 14 and 20, typically that was because an agent was telling potential buyers in the listing, we will consider offers on such and such a date at such and such a time, which was usually 2 weeks to 20 days after it had been listed because they wanted to make sure plenty of people got time to look at the property. So these all are in the time frame where this indicates to me that this is real market influences. This isn't artificially delayed by agents and what they're putting in the listings, which is a little bit in contrast to what we're seeing in terms of percent over or under list price. Given these numbers, I would expect the percent over asking price to be lower. I would expect it to be closer to asking price. So it's interesting to see this kind of trend relating to that number. And I'm still trying to figure out why that is. If we're seeing so many homes selling for above asking price, why are we not seeing these numbers lower? Why are we not seeing them closer to 15 days or 14 days? So still trying to figure that stuff out. And if I get an answer, I'll obviously let you know, probably in the podcast. And if you'd like to check out the podcast, you can find those at my website, soldbyrobert.com. You can also go to therebelbroker.com, which is a page that's just podcast focused. All right. Next. This is switching from looking at just comparing the month of December to the previous month of December to just looking back over our shoulder, right? This is plotted over the calendar year. So we're able to see what the trends are over the whole course of the year. And we can see total active listings is our first indicator. And take a look at that drop. October 2023 and then November and then into December, we just completely took a drop here. Now let's look at this. We see the same thing in 2022. We see the same thing in 2021, but after in 2021 we saw a big jump into 2022. In 2023 we saw a little teeny jump. This tends to be the example shown in 2022 tends to be a little bit more of what we see. We saw a lot of faltering in early 2023 with very little increase in the total number of listings, which is a bit of a surprise, usually in that first quarter, and we'll see a minute in what we were seeing relating to new listings. But normally you would expect this to go up a little bit, so let's compare it. Take a look at that. Why didn't we see total active listings take a huge increase? Well, look at the new listings. See, the new listings obviously went up. Look at the dramatic jump from December to January. This is normally what we see for new listings. In that first quarter, as we build up to the big part of the market in May, we tend to see this big jump. You can see it in 2021 as well. I mean, look at that. That's just crazy. That is normal. That's typical. And we see this, in this case, it peaked in March. Didn't see the same peak in March this time. Peak came a little later. But in past months, this February and March of 2022 thing is kind of where we saw things happening in 2021 and 2020 and 2019. The big action tended to happen in that first quarter of the year in terms of new listings. But now, how is it our total active listings hasn't taken a huge jump here? If we take a look at total number of homes sold, we can see, look at that. We are selling as many homes. I mean, the slope just really jumps here, and we can see that the pause in new listings went with a decline in homes sold as buyers were not able to find the homes they were looking for because they weren't getting listed, right? And we can see that homes sold sort of plateaued and then sort of declined and continued to decline. And in terms of what we're seeing here in the transitions from November to December, big drops in total number of active listings, which we already saw was the same as last year. In terms of total new listings, look at that. Just, again, big drops. And in terms of homes sold, less of a dramatic drop, but still a drop between November and December. November and December, a drop here, also more mild. November and December, a huge drop in 2021. In terms of pending, what should we expect to see with pending? Well, pendings dropped here as well. So in terms of expectations for sales in the following month, we shouldn't expect to see a big increase in sold homes next month, according to this number. If we take a look at November, December, pendings also down there. November, December, pendings also down there. So nothing crazy, nothing that would throw our expectations for the future out of whack. So where does that leave us? That leaves us thinking we may see something similar to what has happened in previous years, which would indicate we start to see listings increase. We start to see total number of active listings increase. My guess would be, because interest rates now are a little bit better than they were, it wouldn't surprise me if we see not only an increase in new listings, but an increase in home buyers. If the home buyer number does increase because of interest rates, this total active listings thing may continue to be flat. Why? Because we're selling them off faster than we can list them. And that would be interesting to see next month. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at Santa Clara County list versus sales price. We are continuing to compare original list price with sales price, and we're looking for places where they go away from each other, and we see that it has happened. It was happening a little bit in November. In December, it's even more pronounced, where the average list price is above the average sales price, and we're seeing those two things going away. Now, as that becomes a reality and continues as a reality, the expectation on my part would be that we start to see that percent over list price go down. But as long as there are still more buyers than sellers, that dynamic of paying more for homes is frequent. If you're not looking in the, and here's the other part of it, if you break this down into submarkets within the county, you find that the places where folks are paying over asking price are the most desirable areas, right? These are areas that folks that are in very high demand. If you're looking for something more middle of the road, more of an average area, there are folks able to get deals that are at or below list price. So just because we're seeing these averages doesn't mean nobody's getting homes below list price, because it's absolutely happening. Taking a quick coffee break there. For anyone there who's enjoying a coffee right along with me, feel free to indulge right around now. Okay, next. Percent of asking price. What are the trends? Now, we can see that while it's declining, it's still above 100%. My guess was that we would have seen this start to decline around August or September, to the point where right around here, I thought we'd be below 100%. We can see that we were below 100% last year. We hit below 100% in August and then dipped a little bit above in September, and then back down in October. I expected to see this year, but the demand just didn't drop. We saw interest rates really impact things right during that time of year when it was at its lowest, when it was at 98.8%. Remember last year, in 2022, remember it was March of 2022 when we saw interest rates go crazy, and they got worse as we went through the year, to the point where they were super high towards the end of the year, and that's clearly what happened here. There was just less competition. Buyers were sort of reeling from those. Didn't see that happen here. We actually saw some softening in interest rates that made it a little bit more beneficial for buyers. And we're starting to see that more. So again, I'm not going to make any predictions about where we're going on percent of asking price, because I think one of the key things is, does buyer participation get improved or reduced by what happens with lending policies? Lending policies clearly seem to be moving more towards reducing rates, and if anything, that will raise this number. And if we just take seasonal influences, right? Where do we usually go from a December? If we look at December of last year, well, it tends to go up, right? And we tend to see it peak right in those peak months of the summer. So my guess would be that from here, if we go with past years, look, here's another December, right? Look at that, as it increases, that this number will go up from here, so that we will stay above 102, 101% in terms of what folks are getting for their properties. So I'm in some markets, again, you can get competitive and be below asking price, but on average, I think we continue to see this 100% plus. All right. Can you hear it? Is the nasal voices coming? All right. So days on market, we can see we had a jump between November and December. That's actually pretty normal. If you look at December last year, we can see November, December, it took a jump. November and December, the year before that, it took a jump. Why do we see a jump in January? Because buyers tend to come out in January. So what ends up happening is and it's usually more like February or March, so that's kind of weird too. But normally what we tend to see is as buyers come out, you might see an increase in days of market because we're selling off homes that didn't sell in previous months, right? Because the demand was low. But, demand hasn't really been that horribly low. Now, this would indicate otherwise in terms of what we saw in December. But I honestly don't have what I consider to be a satisfying explanation as for why we're seeing this increase in days on market, simply because we're selling more homes than we're listing, which is what happened in December. And on average, home prices are above asking. So I don't understand why that number's higher, at least on the county level. And that's the number I won't get too wound up about smaller communities with this number varying like this. But when we're talking about county level, it's an interesting one to sort of try to figure out. Okay, now let's talk about price reductions. And this is becoming less and less of a thing that is super important to track. There we go. Last month in Santa Clara County, we saw 22% of homes had a price reduction. So November. And across the board, and I double checked these numbers. So yes, Santa Clara County, San Jose, and Morgan Hill all lined up with the exact same number. 13% of properties had a price reduction. So that tells us fewer sellers are having to adjust their prices to get sold. In November, it was 22% in San Jose as well. In Morgan Hill, it was 18%. So across the board, those communities have seen a reduction in the amount of homes that need to get a price reduction in order to sell. The other numbers we've covered for December tend to reflect that, except for days on market. Go figure. Year over year change in Santa Clara County was a 48% drop. San Jose was a 52% drop year over year, 50% drop in Morgan Hill. Gilroy, interestingly enough, 19% in November, 29% in December. That's a 14% decrease from the same time. Not between those two numbers, but if you compare 29% to what it was a year ago, it's a 14% reduction. But they have the highest number of homes that have a price reduction. This kind of makes sense. If we refer back to what the average listing price was for the month of December, it was a little high, right? It was a little out of whack. So the expectation then is that some of those homes had to have a price adjusted to bring it into reality so that it could potentially get sold. All right. Okay. So that is a wrap up of the numbers for sort of the county and some smaller communities. If you've got any questions around any of that, this would be the time to ask. We're going to go ahead and jump into some of the news items that I think are relevant. We've got some new numbers to cover, and we've also got a rundown of new laws that have been passed in 2024 that take effect in 2024 that will relate specifically to California investors, homeowners, that kind of stuff. But if you got a question about anything we just covered, now would be the time. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at, that's a wrong place for my face. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of these news items that we've got. Now, the best markets for first-time home buyers in 2024. This one is sort of just interesting, right? So I get an awful lot of things that come into my inbox, particularly from Realtor.com, that just cover data, statistics, interesting things that are going on in the real estate world. And I thought this would be interesting because we are totally not in this, right? The best markets for first-time home buyers. Look at where all those stars are. Nothing west of Texas. Right, so they got some Arkansas, but that's as far more Oklahoma. Right, I'm sorry, Oklahoma is as far as it goes, and that's 231,475. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, for one thing, if you're someone who's very okay with long distance property management stuff, these might be great places for you to consider looking. You'd obviously want to run the numbers and figure out what the rental situation is, how homes are renting, that type of thing in these various areas. And you'd also want to do some research on how landlord friendly these states are. But these are not only good indicators for folks who are first-time buyers, but also folks who are potentially first-time investors. So, and the great thing is from your desktop, you can do an awful lot of research. If it were me and I was looking at these and I'd say, wow, okay, I like that number. Let's say Council Bluffs, Iowa. I'm not a Michigan fan, not a New York fan. Don't know much about what goes on in Connecticut. Don't know much about Maryland. But, Iowa, Oklahoma, Arkansas, these are all places I would consider. Then go on to Zillow and type in that city and act as if you're trying to rent a place there and see what the average rent is for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, right? Which is sort of the bread and butter property. And then start looking at what homes are listed for and do the math to figure out, would it be a cash flow scenario for you? And calculate things in like a 10% management fee, which you could probably get a little less than that if you negotiate it. Figure out what the property taxes are in that state. And again, Googling is going to get you that number. Figure out what insurance is. Figure out an amount you're going to want to save per month for repairs down the road. And then you can figure out what your return on investment is. So just something I thought I'd throw out there for you folks to check out. Next, builder confidence increased in January. Yeah, we'll see. What I find interesting about buyer confidence is you'll get the number of how confident buyers are, but none of the things that would indicate buyer confidence end up happening, right? Buyers all say we're super confident, but then you don't see increased billings for architecture. You don't see permits. You don't see buying of wood, right? You don't see if you're a builder and all the things that would indicate you're confident, you say you're confident, but then you don't take actions that indicate you're confident. And that's frequently what we end up seeing. But mortgage rates is one thing that people are hanging a lot of hopes on, that mortgage rates are well under 7%. Builder confidence in the market for newly built single-family homes climbed 7 points to 44 in January, which is actually still pretty low. 44 is not a high number for confidence. Next, I always like to do this. This is particularly since we just covered our local real estate data. I like to do sort of the general realtor across the country, what's going on type of stuff. And one thing that we can see here is key findings. The median list price grew by 1.9% over last year. If we compare that to, let's see, list price. Where did I put list price? Original list price was up 7.6%, so we're way higher in the county overall. And I'm just going to use that number because remember, original list price was lower in San Jose and Morgan Hill, but overall in the county is kind of the big number we want to look at. Inventory increased 7.9%, and we saw inventory decrease 28%. So that's a variation that we saw between us and sort of overall. New listings was up 26% though, and these are all single-digit increases. So, and in this case, it was things were selling 4 days faster, and for us, things went up. Right? We saw on average homes were selling for longer days, and that number makes sense to me. 4 days faster. Well, excuse me. No, that's not correct. Days on market down 19% from the same time last year. So it was that things were selling for in 31 days last year, 25 days this year. What I was referring to was the change from, say, November to December, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me given the other numbers that we're seeing. All right, existing home sales slipped 1% in December to 3.78 million. I kind of just liked this chart that shows existing home sales and how low it is going all the way back. I believe that if you go all the way back, I believe this number goes all the way back to 1995 is the last time we saw it this low. Yeah, here it is right here. Lowest tally since 1995. So interesting that those, and while in some other areas, this number may be an indication of a tougher market. For us, it's not. For us, there's not enough inventory. If we had more inventory, we'd be selling an awful lot more homes. Next, so this was sort of a much less in-depth review. I've got another one here that's a little bit more in depth here for us in terms of 2024 housing laws. The first one is security deposits, which is on my other list. I wonder if I should just do the other list instead of this one, but maybe just hit these ones because I think it's kind of interesting and it may impact some folks who are landlords or considering becoming landlords in California. Security deposits introduced by Assemblyman, I don't care, would cap security deposits at 1 month's rent, even if the unit is furnished or not. This new law will allow owners of no more than 2 rental properties or no more than 4 units to request up to 2 months of rent. Bill will go into effect starting July 1st. I'm actually confused as to why the state feels like they need to step in on stuff like this. I'm not a fan, but there it is. Rent control. And this is something I think a lot of landlords who are considering becoming landlords in California get pushed away by. We pretty much have de facto rent control in the entire state, which is a bad thing. Require tenants and rent control units who have permanent disabilities related to mobility be allowed to, and that's not what this is, but one of the laws does relate to this. Rent-controlled units have permanent disabilities related to mobility be allowed to relocate to an available and accessible unit at the same rental rate and terms. This requirement will apply to properties with 5 or more rental units and will take effect on January 1st. So what this is basically saying is if you have a multi-unit complex and you are renting to someone with a disability who's on the second floor, if a bottom floor unit becomes available that's the same size or smaller, that person who has a disability will be allowed to occupy that newly vacated unit at the same rent, even though the rent for a floor unit is higher typically than a second floor unit. Not sure what problem folks are solving here. I mean, if you have a disability, I get it. But the idea that a unit that intrinsically has higher value should get rented to you for lower doesn't make a lot of sense. I think the opportunity for abuse here is high. If you're someone who is renting on the second floor and you've been renting on the second floor and you haven't felt the need to move, I'm not sure why then that should equal you getting a downstairs unit without an increase in rent if it is a situation where that rent should be higher for that unit. I think, and I think that it will, just like we had that crazy ballooning of support animals on airplanes, which is now being rolled back in a lot of cases. I think a lot of people will come in and say, I have a disability and I want that first floor unit that's the same size as mine, and you can't change my rent. I think that abuse is going to be a very likely thing to happen in this case. Credit history, and this is one we've talked about on the podcast, which is pretty annoying. Let's see. I don't care who proposed it. They're all idiots. History. Use of a person's credit history as part of the application process for a rental housing accommodation. Tenants must offer the application the option to provide reasonable evidence to pay, such as government benefit payments, pay records, and bank statements. The bill will go into effect starting January 1st. That's a very stupid way and a very convoluted way of saying you can't use credit history if you're a landlord. So here we go. So this is the more involved list. I've highlighted the ones that would relate specifically to homeowners. So let's just start at the top and scroll down and hit them as we go. All right, here we go. So some of these are related to real estate agents, and not like if you're buying or selling a piece of real estate yourself personally. So I don't tend to spend a lot of time telling agents what they should be looking into. So we'll just focus on you guys. Okay, first, ADUs may be sold separately from the primary unit as a condominium. So this one is super interesting. So this is a law in California, and how this is happening, I don't get. California does not strike me as a state that does this kind of thing, but my guess is they simply see it as a way. Home ownership is the thing, right? The big buzzword. Am I even? Yes, I am. The big buzzword is ownership, right? The stat that that everyone wants to point to and say we're wonderful is the number of folks who own homes. And I don't think that's necessarily the right number. I think good housing, regardless of whether it's a rental situation or an ownership situation, should simply be the emphasis. But, that's just my opinion. This allows local agencies to adopt ordinances to allow the separate conveyance of an ADU from the primary residence as a condominium. So let's say you have a oversized lot and you had an ADU installed in your backyard. You can now sell it as a separate thing, as a condo to somebody else. I think that the legal complications that are going to come out of this are ridiculous. And of course, maybe folks will think about it seriously before they do it. I get the feeling the temptation of selling it as a condominium because imagine how much they'll sell it for, right? If you're somebody who lives in city X, Y, or Z, and you've got yourself a 1 bedroom, 1 bath ADU in your backyard, and you realize you can sell that thing for $500,000 or more, that's going to be extremely tempting. But remember, when you're doing that, it elevates all of the rights and easements and things that this person who owns that condo is going to have. So I would suggest, if anybody who's thinking about doing this, make sure you have sussed out all of these access issues. Because as soon as you start doing that, you're making greater complications. I would also be interested in the fine print of this, because you, as the owner of the property who has sold a condominium that is on that property, because it's not going to be a rezoning. Remember, a condominium, you just own the airspace that's contained within the unit, right? So you're still on the owner's property. You simply own the airspace now that it's in. Now, a smart homeowner might not only sell that to you, but then also create a homeowners association of two, them and you, where you now have to pay HOA dues. The amount of things that could potentially happen here it's one of those deals where I just want to sit down somewhere with my popcorn and watch this unfold and put it on fast forward and just see what kind of crazy stuff happens. Let's see here. Housing makes permanent the existing prohibition on local government's ability to require owner occupancy on a parcel containing an accessory dwelling unit. This actually makes sense to me, and the fact that they make laws like this just annoys me. But the bottom line here is that you don't have to be an occupant. You don't have to be it doesn't have to be your residency in order for you to have that ADU going on. This is a prohibition on local government's ability to require owner occupancy on a parcel that contains an ADU, which is a good thing. So I think that's actually a move in the right direction. But the idea that they should be able to say one way or the other on this is idiotic to me. Let's see. Yeah, that's not what I think makes sense. Housing adds exclusions to the requirement that any publicly funded low-rent housing project receive voter approval. It expands the exclusions to include money appropriated and dispersed by the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, an allocation of federal or state low-income housing tax credits, money appropriated from affordable housing and sustainable communities. Let's see. Next, increase the exemption limit for improvements otherwise subject to the California Coastal Commission. So for those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you know I am not a fan of the California Coastal Commission. The good folks over at Pacific Legal are frequently beating the California Coastal Committee in court because of their overreach. But check this. I highlighted this phrase here. Previously, the Coastal Act exempted improvements necessary to protect life and public property from imminent danger from seeking a permit if the improvements were valued under $25,000. So in other words, let's say something has happened and you need to remediate it on your property, because if you don't, it could put people's lives at risk, or it represents a huge risk. If it cost over $25,000 to do that work, you had to get the Coastal Commission to approve the work. How long do you think it takes the Coastal Commission to approve this stuff? Long enough that an awful lot of people could die without that work getting done. What this rule did is it increases the exemption to $125,000. So now if there's a life-threatening thing and it costs less than $125,000 to remediate, you can do it without getting approval from the Coastal Commission. I would have preferred this to read the Coastal Commission no longer exists, but I'll take what I can get. At least that is a small move in the right direction. Let's see here. Some of these are just not relevant. Attorney General has unconditional right to intervene without court permission in lawsuits brought by third parties for alleged violations of state housing laws. I completely disagree with this one. If there's anything that we in California understand, it's that there need to be checks and balances, and this eliminates a check on the Attorney General. He should not simply be able to intervene when there's a complaint made. it needs to go through the typical process, right? Anything that slows down government is usually something that ends up in being better than when government or a single individual in government can take action unilaterally. So I'm not a fan. Insurance extends the FAIR plan to commercial properties. So this is something a lot of folks in California are aware of. We are in a home insurance crisis. The California Fair Access to Insurance Requirements Plan Association is a joint reinsurance association of state insurers that is established to, among other things, assist persons in securing basic property insurance for qualified property for which insurance cannot be obtained and through the normal insurance market. This is simply a way for you to, if you have a property that is owned commercial, you can now take advantage of this. Right of disabled tenant to locally rent-controlled property to move to first floor unit. This is something we already discussed. Let's see. Landlord must offer ability to pay in lieu of reliance on credit history and reports in assessing a tenant's rental application when prospective tenant is receiving a government rent subsidy such as Section 8 rental voucher. So it's basically saying, all I have to do is provide you with information that shows I make the money to make the payments without you being able to look at my credit history to see that even though I make the money, I never pay my debts. This is dumb. This is something that's been going on in California for a long time. It makes it unlawful in instances, makes it unlawful. So remember, this is not like preferred. This is simply you're breaking the law. In instances where there is a government rent subsidy, so if you have any people who is getting a rent subsidy, for a landlord to use person's credit history as part of the application process for a rental accommodation without offering the applicant the option at the applicant's discretion of providing lawful, verifiable alternative evidence. So I want to know what the rules would be if I do both. I want to get the credit history, and I also want to offer them this opportunity to give me verifiable income information. The bottom line is I would do both. If I was a renter, if I was a landlord in California, I would do this. And one of the things, I'm hypersensitive these days to how landlord friendly is the location where you want to invest. Like for those of you who've been listening to my podcast, you guys know I've had an investment property in Hawaii now for 15 years, and Hawaii is ridiculously hostile to homeowners that rent to rental properties, particularly short-term rentals. And I'm going to throw it out there and say that despite the fact that they talk about how they're preserving neighborhoods, it's really about getting rid of competition for hotels who have an extremely strong lobby in Hawaii, particularly on Oahu. So I'm now in a position where I'm looking at taking money out of that investment and investing it elsewhere. Would I invest in California? Probably not. This state does not seem to be moving in a direction that is good for landlords. Now, if I found an amazing deal in California where I got outstanding return on investment, sure, maybe that makes it worth it to me to deal with the silliness that comes out of Sacramento to do that. But when there are other states that simply get out of my way and let me offer the service I want to offer the accommodation I want to offer on the terms I am most comfortable with, I would much rather go there than to a state that is constantly sticking their fingers in that for me. And I bring that up because when I am talking to folks, part of my fiduciary responsibility, at least as the way I interpret it, when I'm first talking to someone who wants to list their home is, so here's all your options, right? You could sell it, and this is probably how much you'd walk away with. You could rent it, and even if you decided you never wanted to touch it, you just wanted a check to appear in your bank every month, you could do a property management relationship where you just see the checks appearing and you're not dealing with it. You're not getting calls about toilets or anything else. This is probably what you would get based on what I'm seeing. So the other thing is that I have to cover is these are the complications relating to being a landlord in this state. And granted, it's not as bad as it is, say, in Hawaii, which is ridiculous, but local governments and state governments in California are constantly interfering. Alameda is unbelievable, where they're still extending you can't collect the rent kinds of rules that are kind of hang-ons from COVID, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Why would you want to? And I have clients I'm talking to right now who own multifamily units. I have got one guy who's talking to me who owns a duplex, who wants to get rid of it because he's currently making $0 per month because he has non-performing tenants that he can't get rid of. Of course, no one's going to buy a property with non-performing tenants. So in order for him to sell it, he has to solve the problem that makes him want to sell it. which is a nice little merry-go-round we're on right now. But that's the reality. The state completely circumvents the process of, I have a product to offer. These are the terms under which I'm willing to offer it to you. You agree to that, and if you violate any of that agreement, you get kicked out. That's it. Well, the state interferes in that and makes it not only to the point where they circumvent a legal agreement between a renter and a landlord, but they will then say, not only can we say that you don't get to enforce this lease agreement, you're not going to get paid because this person doesn't get evicted because they're not paying their rent. Next, tenants may keep bicycles, e-bikes, and other micro-mobility transport devices inside their units. Again, I get it, but it's not something there should be a law about. If I am a landlord and I have someone who wants to bring in their bicycle, e-bike, or micro-mobility transport device, I should be able to charge greater rent. That's going to be more wear and tear on my stuff. If I've got carpeting in the unit, it's going to track in stuff from outside. And over the course of years, that's going to do much more damage to the unit that I have to remediate when that person moves out. If you're someone who has one of these and you want to have this stuff parked inside the unit, that's fine, but that shouldn't be something that the government interferes with. Landlord-tenant prohibition on local government crime-free housing programs and ordinances. So this one's bizarre because it's basically trying to say you don't get to block someone from renting your property because they have a criminal record. And frankly, you as a landlord should be able to use any information that you decide is important in deciding who you rent to, and that the state can tell you not to should annoy all of us. Landlord-tenant security deposits limited to 1 month's rent. Again, why is the government getting involved in this? There's an exception for small landlords defined as a landlord who is a natural person or LLC and owns no more than 2 residential rental properties with no more than a total of 4 units offered for rent. And if there's an exemption for folks of that size, why is there not an exemption for all of them, right? I'm not sure what the deal is there. Tenant Protection Act tightens up requirements for no-fault evictions, adds damages, penalties, attorney fees, and enforcement mechanisms for violations. And tightening up requirements for no-fault evictions means they make it harder for you to evict. The Tenant Protection Act is a statewide rent cap and just cause eviction law. The fact that the state is telling you what your rent cap can be should annoy everyone. There are only 4 permissible reasons in which a landlord may base a no-fault termination of tenancy. None of this should be spelled out by the state. It should be in the lease agreement. That's it. And I guess maybe in the absence of a lease agreement, there should be a default to what the state says. But anyway, termination of tenancy based on owner move-in is one. Termination based on intent to demolish or substantially remodel a residential real property. Further provides that any termination notice does not comply with any damages and enforcement mechanisms, recovery, and possession. So let's see. Landlord-tenant unbundled parking spaces for 16-unit apartments in specified counties. I don't know why I highlighted this one. It's just you can't include the rental of the space in the lease agreement. It has to be a separate agreement, which means unbundling it. Let's see here. The rest of these, I think, are all real estate agent specific. There was vacation rentals. This was one I really wanted to hit. Disclosure of all mandatory fees. So I'm not real sure why this is a thing. I have never seen a circumstance where at the end of your reservation process, you don't get a summary of fees, right? I know I've been doing vacation rentals for over a decade, heck, man, almost 2 decades. And whenever you get to that final bill, it's showing you the breakdown of what everything is. So I'm not sure why this needs to be a thing, but what they're trying to do is say that if you're going to do a short-term lodging thing, that in whatever the number is you're showing up front has to be the number with everything, minus state stuff. Beginning July 4th, 2024, provides place for short-term lodging as defined from advertising, displaying, or offering a room rate that does not include all fees or charges required to stay at the short-term lodging, except government-imposed taxes and fees. Why are the government's imposed taxes and fees treated differently than than the homeowners' taxes and fees, right? And this almost feels like a solution in search of a problem, but the bottom line is before you click buy, you're going to know what the total cost is, and you're going to see a breakdown of what that is. So I'm not real sure why the thought is that this was necessary. This is another one that is, again, it's another stupid thing from California. Vacation rentals, right to cancel within 24 hours. Now, the way I have it set up with my properties was you only have a right to cancel if you give me at least, without any penalty, if you give me at least 2 weeks notice. Right? Because there at least there is some thin possibility that I could reschedule someone for the time that you're leaving if I've got that kind of notice. If you're doing a short-term rental, if you're canceling within 24 hours, I'm probably not going to make anything on that time that you were there. So some sort of amount of money should be able to be retained by the renter or by the landlord when you do this. It requires a hosting platform, hotel, third-party booking service, or short-term rental to allow a reservation to be canceled without penalty for at least 24 hours after the reservation is I'm sorry. I read this wrong. Reservation is confirmed if the reservation is made 72 hours or more before the time of check-in. All right, so I read this completely the other way. My initial reading was that it was 24 hours before the time of reservation, not when the reservation was made. So it's within the reservation confirmed. So, okay. I withdraw my my hullabaloo over that one. And yeah, that's totally a thing. And why, again, this needs to be a law, I don't get. So anyway. And that was it. Well, now I feel dumb having brought up that last one when it really wasn't even necessary. All right, we're a little over an hour now. If anyone's got any questions, this would be a great time to throw them out there. I have, I pulled up something in Snap for us, and I've got a couple of the things, but let's just do this as a way to say goodbye today on this wonderful Saturday morning. Maybe a little more coffee for me. Because I know I wanted to talk about renting versus buying data. And when I'm talking to folks who are looking at listing their home, this is one thing I bring up because this one is kind of amazing. So this is us, right? This is Santa Clara County. Rental cost per month on average, $3,262. Buying, $10,639. Surplus or deficit, $7,376. Buying saves you 226%. So that's what renters are kind of faced with. And I think when you look at this data, you realize that there is so much month-to-month potential profit. And there's one other thing we can look at here too. So if we go to Zillow and we look, let's just do San Jose. And we do for rent. And let's say we do 3 beds, 2 baths. Let's zoom in far enough that we actually start. Look at the numbers. 4,500, 3,400. Let's see if we can find anything below 4,000. So this is what you should do if you are someone who has a home and you're considering, and you've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. Look in your neighborhood and see how much things are renting for. So you wouldn't set what the maximum is, but if you wanted to pay under 4K, these are your options. So not horrible, but let's take it down to 3K. Boom. Right? So 3 to 4K is where it's happening. And remember, this is everything. This is apartments. This is, that's a house for rent, so that's not actually too bad. 1,200 square feet. There you go. But remember, downtown San Jose, that's what this is. Sort of a condo apartment kind of setup, $3,000. But this is a great way for you to get a feeling for what you could rent your house for. So let's say you are someone who lived down here. Let's say you lived in Oak Ridge. That's this area of South San Jose right here, just south of the 85 freeway. Let's get rid of this. And let's go ahead and say you've got a 3-bed, 2-bath, and let's say you've got a home. So this is what you'd be looking at. You'd want to, when as you do it, just take a look at what it is. It's a 2-story. It's 2,900 square feet. Is yours a 2-story at about 2,900 square feet? And this obviously has 4 beds. Let's see. You can also go on Trulia, and I believe they'll let you pick exactly. See, here's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,143, so $3,800. So you can get an idea for what your home would rent for, and you can definitely do a budget on how much money would you make as a landlord, and use the numbers we talked about earlier. Go ahead, include an assumption of a 10% property management fee and all your other fees, all your holding costs, right? You're not going to be paying electricity. You're not going to be paying water. You're not going to be paying trash. So don't include those things, but you'll want insurance. You want a certain amount to put aside for any maintenance issues, 10% assumed for property management, but hopefully you'll negotiate that down, and just do a quick spreadsheet and see where it leaves you. Okay. That's about it, folks. I sure hope that this has been an interesting coffee in real estate for you. I know I enjoy jumping in and giving you this information. Now, if you've got any questions or concerns, you want to find out the just really instant home value of your home, feel free to head on over to soldbyrobert.com. Right there on the front page, left side, just enter your address. You'll immediately get that data. You don't have to give me your email address. You don't have to give me anything. But if you do want to get regular updates so that you know what that number is month to month, and you get amazing tools and calculators for you to figure out more about your home equity, do provide your email address, and you'll be updated monthly with that stuff. So, and of course, if you want to reach out to me directly, you can find me at soldbyrobert.com. All right, folks. Going to finish off the rest of my coffee, do a little bit more work today. Got some homes to show in the afternoon. And thanks again for coming out and spending your time with me. I will see you all next time.